Um, Good afternoon, and thanks for having us here. My name's Eric Nelson. I'm a delegate out of Kanawha County, and really, Chris, thank you, and Dick, and everything that you all have done the last 2 years. And Julie, thank you for everything you've done, as well as Karen. Do want to thank Hollywood Casino and Scott, if you're still around. Gosh, what a wonderful facility this is. What a huge investment this has been into the Eastern Panhandle, and one that we're very thankful for. We have a little slide presentation today, and we'll kind of go through some of the major points of our budget, and hopefully leave some time for some questions there at the end, and we'll just go back and forth if that's okay. So quickly, picture's worth 1,000 words, but our total budget in the state of West Virginia for fiscal year 17, $12.7 billion. The big points to look at here: federal government provides $4.8 billion to our state, 38% of our total budget. General revenue, which is the orange, 33%, about $4.2 billion. Special revenue at $2 billion, and then state roads at $1 billion. Okay. So where is the $12.7 billion spent? DHHR, the big one at the bottom, takes 40%, $5 billion of our total budget. Education, so it's the gray one on the right and the red one at the top left, roughly takes 25%, or $3 billion. So 65% of our budget goes to health and education. Okay. Next one, please. So this third graph is our general revenue, and that's primarily what the finance committees and the legislature deals with during our short 60-day session. And again, remember, we are part-time legislators, so in our special session, or it's not special session, regular session, as well as the special session this time, we ended up with a budget of just under $4.2 billion. The big items here: education and DHHR. Together, they take up 82% of our general revenue. Most of our general revenue comes from personal income taxes and consumer sales tax. Together, they bring in 75%. Okay.
I think it's worth noting something that is often missed, that the part of the budget that we have to balance, the part that caused all the controversy in extra session, is this section. If you go back to the first slide, you'll see there's all kinds of other money in our budget, but it's only the general revenue section has to be balanced. For example, we do not balance the road fund. We don't balance what happens in the insurance commissioner's office. We don't balance a lot of special revenue activities, but it's these activities. If you're a general revenue activity, you're the one that's in harm's way. If you go back to general revenue, was that it? Yeah, that's it. I'm sorry, I thought it flicked off. So you can see that when we were trying to balance the budget and talking about cuts, it was in this area. People to me all the time saying something about highways or whatever, and they say, we're not balancing the highway budget. It's either education or DHHR, basically, or military affairs and public safety. Those are the biggies. And when the cuts came, they had to come to these areas. Not highways, not the insurance commissioner, not several other special revenue accounts. That was the challenge of doing the balanced budget, because you got to focus on these particular areas, many of which had already seen about $300 to $400 million of cuts prior to this particular year. So this is where the challenge is. These particular items right here. That $4 billion section of the $12 billion budget.
Two other items that are buried within this. PEIA, so public employees insurance, roughly is $350 million that the state pays. We pay $460 million in pension payments. So buried within this is $800 million in benefits to our state employees. Yes. Next one. Quickly, just a quick 10-year history of four primary revenue sources. The yellow one federal sources, you can see that's had the greatest growth over the last 10 years. The second line, general revenue, slight growth over the last 10 years, primarily inflation through personal income tax. Down at the bottom, both of them have been flat, lottery and our road fund. You know, the road fund is a huge concern for us as a state right now. Our revenues have been flat, but our needs and the needs have been growing and the expenses have as well. Next one. Quickly, I think it's been mentioned already today. We had a serious budget problem this year. That's the result of most of it right here, severance taxes. Again, a 10-year history. You've seen the growth. In the early 2000s, the growth was due to coal. Coal's fallen off since '08, but it was taken up and replaced by natural gas. But what happened in the far right column, which is this past year, 2016, severance dropped by over $250 million. Cut in half. That was a combination of two things real quick. Coal production fell 20%. Dropped from, I think, a little over 105 million tons to almost 80 million tons of production. In just, I think, 10 years ago, we were at 150 million. The big driver, in addition to coal, is natural gas. Volumes were up 10%, higher than ever. But the price that we received was 1/3 of what was estimated. That created our problem, okay? So this showed up very early in the year, mid-year. The governor instituted, he announced that we were at a $250 million shortfall projected for the year. He immediately made $94 million in cuts, and primarily that was a 4% across the board in all agencies and 1% for education. Did some hiring freeze and some other things, okay? So we step into the session and, you know, obviously PEIA, our pensions are big, the Promise Scholarship, our infrastructure and roads. And then the next one. So with our first day of session, January 14th or whatnot, now all of a sudden the governor's come in and said, our projected shortfall is now $354 million. Again, $94 million in cuts had already been made. Our workers' comp, we did some legislation, and in essence, it has been a very positive program implemented 10 years ago to cover a $4 billion unfunded obligation that's almost paid off. We basically took some of the funding sources there and brought it into the 2016 budget. We swept excess cash accounts to the tune of $96 million, and then we hit the rainy day for $52 million. Yeah. So we get to the budget that we finally passed. 4.2, you saw that on the third pie chart earlier. We balanced that right at the end, had additional cuts over and above the $94 million, an additional $45 million. So almost $150 million in cuts in this budget. We hit our rainy day fund, to the tune of $70 million. Special revenue sweeps, 30-some, and then we did have the tobacco tax that through the special session was passed. Again, another 10-year history of our general revenue. I mentioned that the personal income tax and consumer sales tax, the top two lines, make up over 75% of our budget. Slight growth over the last 10 years. Take a look at that red line, the third one there. That's our severance tax. And you can see how the volatility started in '08, and then the bottom dropped out this past year. All our other general revenue sources are pretty much flatlined. Our issue here in the state, and one that we are seriously overcoming, is diversification, the need for greater diversification, okay?
Yeah. Stay on that slide for a second. I don't think he emphasized, but you can see the one line that dropped off, which is the severance thing. So it's just a restatement of what was said earlier, and that's the real problem in terms of even going forward this year, is that though the tobacco tax passed this year, it's projected that next year's budget, and we'll know pretty soon by the revenues that start showing up in the monthly reports, whether or not you're going to have a $300 million problem next year. Plus the flood is an issue that's unquantified at this point. I'd just like to add a couple things that we kind of flew over real quickly. You notice the lottery revenue. We don't have a slide that shows where that comes from, but obviously we're here at the Hollywood Casino, which is, of the 4 casinos, one of the most productive in terms of casino revenue. Overall, just a big picture, these are round numbers, but casino revenue is about 200 million or a little in that area somewhere. No, casinos, because yeah, $200 million a year is from the, I call them the neighborhood machines, the limited video lottery, and then the rest of the money is Powerball and so forth like that. The limited video lottery and Powerball is pretty stable. The casino, obviously, revenue has declined based upon competition and so forth. Several things are funded out of lottery, and some lottery money is used for general revenue. 65 million, I think, which is kind of de minimis when you think in terms of the 4.1 billion of all the rest. But the casino, the lottery money is committed to several things already. We spend that on several items that are pretty popular. Promise scholarships, seniors programs, excuse me, my allergies are catching up with me, and the debt service to bonds that either built schools or built different projects around the state. Those kinds of things over the years are part of the lottery thing. So it sits down there. It's a revenue source that's committed and spent and has to remain, but it's important to our fiscal life to give some consideration as to how that's going to work going forward with all the threats that may be out there against the lottery revenue. So that's probably one other looming budget issue. It's not right on us right now, but it could happen in the near future. So I'll just leave it with that.
I may just briefly talk about our rainy day fund. For the 3rd year in a row, we've had to dip into that to make ends meet. 2 years ago, $100 million. 2016, or just finished 16 budget, 98 million and 70 million in our projected 17 budget. This is busy, and I apologize, but it happens to show all 50 states that have rainy day funds. West Virginia is highlighted as number 4. We have prior to this past year, we had the 4th highest rainy day fund as a percent of general revenue of any state in the nation. That's one thing that has kept us at a higher rating agency debt service, bond rating, excuse me, thank you. But even after these last 2 years of dipping into our so-called savings account for 17, we will still exceed $700 million, or 17% of our general revenue budget. The rainy day fund was started in '95. There's 2 parts to it. It was supplemented in '06 by a tobacco bond fund, but it has been very solid. It's an area of last resort for us to basically balance our budget, but it was set up for times like this.
I would just say one thing though, even though it says rainy day fund on the slide, in the law it's actually called the Revenue Shortfall Reserve Fund. There's no reference to any rainy day fund in the law. It's just picked up that nickname over the years, basically maybe because early on in the Wise administration it was used for disaster and flood relief, and it probably will be used again in a special session in a month or so. But in actual fact, it was set up for revenue shortfall periods, which we have one. And but it's important for our bond rating that it remain above, I think, 15% of the general revenue number, so that Eric and I had the opportunity to listen to the bond rating agency's interview basically us, but basically the revenue department. Though when they send the presentation to New York, they put our names on it. But Speaker Kiss, I still call him Speaker Revenue Secretary Kiss, and other ones make the presentation. It's interesting to listen to what outsiders were saying about the state in terms of the bond rating, and they like the fact that we've got that. What they don't like now is we do not have a structurally sound budget going forward. And by structurally sound, it's very simply defined. In that general revenue section that we talked about earlier, are your revenues going to be able to keep up with your expenditures? Or are you going to cut your expenditures down to your revenues? It's that simple. So that for the past 4 or 5 years, when these shortfalls have hit Governor Tomlin, he's wired it together with cash and rainy day money and cuts. But after 5 years of this and this huge punch we took last year, there's not much wiggle room left. So we're as West Virginians, we face a decision, probably on the revenue side. I know some in this room will probably argue with me on that, or we face an expenditure cut decision, to be honest, and look at it. I mean, you can't talk about education and raising a workforce and then cut the heck out of it, folks. I just don't think you can do it. But anyway, if we can get, if the agencies see us having developed a structurally sound budget, whichever way we go, that'll keep our bond rating strong, which is good for us in terms of the bonds that you may own or the bonds that we may issue. So that's the big issue going forward. What will happen in our economy in the next year, and what will we do to make that budget structurally sound, at least for the next 4 to 6 years, to satisfy those who look at us and for our own good. So that's my little editorial comment, and I'll stop there.
Maybe one next. This is going forward, some of the issues in front of us, and I think that we're open for some questions if there are any. Yes?
During the last session and all the talk, they kept mentioning the sweeps, how much money was tied up in agencies, and we need to get that out. Is there any guess how much is in these accounts that could be swept? And why aren't we legislating to undo the state's agencies' ability to conceal the swept funds?
Okay, his question was, what about sweeping agency accounts? And I think there was an editorial comment about, trying to do something to keep people from hiding money. Actually, the money's not hidden. With the OASIS system, we are able to see exactly where money is. And let me explain, there's 2 things. If it's a general revenue agency, the ones that you saw up there, those agencies, and let me just give you a brief example, the Senate or the legislature or anybody, if you don't spend the money that's previously been appropriated to you, the budget then allows for it to be reappropriated. But the state budget is interesting in the sense that we cannot use reappropriated money as new revenue. So that when you balance the budget, it's the money you take from July to July over against the money you spend from July to July. I'll give you an example of one account that Eric and I agreed on this year. Economic development. I don't know if the economic development director is in the room or not, but each economic development director gets $30,000 a year. It was $1.5 million in the budget. We cut that back to about $800,000. And they were upset, but we said, but you got $700,000 to $800,000 in reappropriated money. Just spend that. So, and what you're asking is that a lot of that reappropriated money was called upon in the Senate particularly. We gave up $10 million of our reappropriated money that had been sitting there for years. But there's more of it there, but it's not as much as you think. And what you have to do with an agency is, quote, vet them, that's what we call it. Bring them in and say, all right, there appears to be money sitting here at a given point in time as you look at the report. Well, that money may be gone in a month or it may be sitting there, but you go through and Actually, the staff of both House and Senate did some of that. Now the other, that's reappropriated general revenue. Now I want to talk about the other one and then I'll shut up. Other accounts, like the insurance commissioner or the real estate commission or DHA or DNR or whatever, they're special revenue accounts. They have what are called cash balances. So they're not reappropriated, it's just cash they've got in their possession. And some of that was swept. The insurance commissioner gets swept every year. It's obvious the insurance commission collects exorbitant fees from insurance companies, well, not exorbitant, but collects a lot of fees from insurance companies, gets a lot of money from agents and so forth, and there's $30 million sitting there, and it ends up being swept. So that it's not hidden, and it's not, slush funds. I've heard those terms used. I don't think those are fair. But at the same time, we see those, and there was, if you look back over the past 5 years, under Governor Tomlin and trying to fill these gaps, there's been a lot of this money that's been swept or appropriated or taken. There's more there, but I can tell you that if you took all the cash and all the rainy day money, and we still have a $300 million problem in the next 2 years, in the next 2 or 3 years, you would run out of all of it. All the hidden cash, if you want to call it that, it's not really hidden, but it's, all the cash accounts and everything, you'd run out of all of it. So this year, there was a lot of it brought forward, but it's not a final permanent solution. It is a stopgap solution, but it's not a healthy thing to just keep doing it. And you're going to wake up one day and there you are. So I hope that answers your question. It's pretty direct. It's my opinion, my view, and that is what it is.
Just one follow-on. Both of our staffs and committees are looking seriously at all of these special revenue accounts for the first time in history, really. It has not been looked at. So we're committed to that. We use the interim session to do that and lead into the next session and do what's right as it relates to the balances that are there and should they be there. Well, thank you all very much and appreciate it.